Mercedes has just unveiled the EQE, and this is the production version of the E-Class sized electric sedan from Mercedes. And if it feels a little bit like deja vu, you're not alone, because it's pretty much a copy of the larger Mercedes EQS. And I'm going to show you exactly how similar these two are when we go into Photoshop. I'm going to show you the front, the side, and the rear and compare the two. I'm a huge fan of brand identity, but in this case, is Mercedes taking it a little too far by almost copying the same exact design as the EQS. Mercedes calls this style a progressive luxury, and for a creative brand such as Mercedes, that has to be one of the most uncreative descriptions I've ever heard. Progressive luxury. I mean, it's such cliche that it makes my eyes twitch. Some of the spec and tech here. The EQE will initially be available only in rear-wheel drive in the EQE 350 form. It has a single electric motor at the rear, putting out 288 horsepower and 391 pound-feet of torque, which is 41 horsepower and 28 pound-feet of torque less than the EQS 450. And Mercedes says that the EQE 350 can accelerate from 0 to 60 in 5.6 seconds, which is not bad, but at the same time, 288 horsepower, that is less than the base model Tesla Model 3, which is a smaller car than the EQE. Feels a little underpowered for an electric car, but at the same time, the range here is estimated to be around 410 miles, and that is a pretty significant distance it can go. You never know how accurate these numbers are until the cars are actually out on the road and people start to drive them and use them like they normally do. And it can gain 155 miles of range in just 15 minutes on a DC fast charger, which is pretty normal. Charging from 10 to 80% takes 31 minutes using a DC charger, while 10 to 100 charge on a 240 volt wall charger takes 9.5 hours, which isn't too bad. You can just leave it when you come home from work or whatever, and then in the morning you have a full charge. And the reason for this very long mileage range is that the EQS is the world's most aerodynamic production car, and since the EQE is almost a copy of the EQS, that's probably the same case with the EQE here. I think the EQS and the EQE has a very similar drag coefficient, which is the lowest in the automotive production car world. The EQE will arrive at US dealers at some point in 2022, likely with a starting price around $65,000. And on top of this, we also have now, Mercedes just unveiled an EQ concept for the G-Wagon, and we also have the EQS 53 AMG, which I think looks a lot better than the EQS 450 just by adding wheels and different graphics to the car. The EQS 53 AMG puts out 761 horsepower with the AMG Dynamic Plus package, which is not bad, but it's not nowhere near Tesla Plaid, for example, which has over 1,000 horsepower. Maybe they will come out with something in that range, but at the same time, when we talk about horsepower and stuff when it comes to electric cars, it's getting kind of ridiculous when you think 761 horsepower is like mid-range for a top electric sedan. It's pretty cool though. I mean, it's a fast car for sure. So let's jump into Photoshop here and let's talk about the EQE up here on the top and just have a look at how similar this design is to the EQS at the bottom. It's crazy how similar these are. And I've always talked about, I like when companies keep their family tradition within the bloodline or whatever, within the lineup. So you have the same kind of styling across the smallest car and all the way up to the biggest S-Class, in this case the EQS and the EQE. In this case, it feels like it's almost too identical of a design. So let's have a look here. We have the same kind of lines here, and we have this progressive luxury style, which is almost a bubble or an ellipse like this, and that brings down the drag coefficient obviously and gives this a 410 mile range on paper. At the same time, we have this line right here going into the rear fender right here, and we have this air outlet here, which I'm not sure you can have on the you might have it on the EQE, but I don't think it fits on the EQS down here. And look at the taillights. I don't know if these are the exact same style or same design as the EQS, or if it's actually a separate production piece, or if they just took the EQS lights, slammed them onto the rear of the EQE as well. Gonna have a look at that closer when we look at the rear view. But if we look at the EQS and compare it to the top here, the big difference here is that we have a longer wheelbase here. These are very much the same design graphically and proportions and so on, but at the same time, this change in wheelbase here, I think, makes a massive difference on what I think the appearance of these cars and how good they look. I think the EQE looks a lot better than the EQS here, just because of the shorter wheelbase. Even though I'm not a huge fan of the bubbleness of these new EVs that we see coming out here to lower the drag coefficient. At the same time, if you have the right kind of wheelbase on these cars, it makes a massive difference. I just want to talk about the front fascia here. You have the EQS on the bottom, and then you have the EQE up here up top, and it's very similar here as well. This is going to be hard to tell, even for me, to tell these apart. But as you know, the lower we go in the model range, for example, the S-Class is more restrained, E-Class a little bit more styling, C-Class, designers get to have a lot of fun. You can see that here too. We have a bit more styling in the curvatures framing the grille and the headlights than we have on the EQS down here. A little bit more restrained, but it's not a lot. It's almost identical front faces here on these two, except for this little curvature that dips down right here in this part, and we have a bit more fluid lines down here as well compared to this part right here. But other than that, it's very identical. Same thing in the rear end. It's crazy how similar these two cars are. I'm not sure, as I said, if this is a different design than we have on the EQS at the bottom there, because they look pretty much identical when we have a look at the curvatures and how these taillights wrap around the rear end of these cars. It looks identical to me, but at the same time, we do have the shorter wheelbase here compared to the massive EQS, where the wheels sit all the way in the front or in the rear of the body, and it looks kind of weird when you look at the EQS from a side view. It looks too stretched out, and I want to have a little more overhang, at least in the rear end. Looking at it from a front view here, what I want to do here in the redesign is do the same kind of styling that I did with the EQS redesign. Just try to see what happens if we make it into a more of a traditional looking sedan. It's not going to have the same drag coefficient, obviously, if we do that, but it's just as an experiment to see if these graphics here would work if we have it more straight up here and have this a bit lower going into a greenhouse which has the A-pillar stopping a bit sooner than this, and just have some fun and see how that will turn out when we apply these changes onto the EQE. One thing I want to acknowledge here by Mercedes is I think they are currently the manufacturers that creates the best looking wheels for their cars. I think the wheels, when it comes to production manufactured stock wheels, I think the Mercedes is doing a fantastic job with their wheels at the moment. They look simple and they look elegant at the same time. It's just a beautiful approach to wheel design, and it suits the brand Mercedes overall. And they are stylish, simple, and at the same time there are some complexities within the wheel design. I think these, if you want to have EVs, you need to have proper wheels. I think that's a problem that Tesla has at some points with their wheel design. It just looks like they skipped leg day, but here on Mercedes you still have 410 mile of range, and you can still have beautiful big wheels like this. It doesn't look like they just had some sort of pan covering them or something like that. They are actually, they look like sport performance wheels, and I just want to acknowledge that for Mercedes. They do a great job designing their wheels at the moment. And looking at the EQE here from a side view, it's not a bad looking car for an EV. I mean, it still has the bubbliness shape to it, but I like this a lot more than the Mercedes EQS, and I think that has to do with specifically the rear end. You can kind of see a little bit more of a trunk in the EQE when you compare it to the EQS, and I think that is one of these details that just makes it a lot better looking design compared to the EQS, and of course the shorter wheelbase as well. So what I'm doing here in the redesign is just having some fun. I know this is not in line with their objective, which is to of course has as long range as possible with their design, and that's why these bubbly shapes, progressive luxury shapes are coming out now, not just from Mercedes but a lot of other EVs. If you look at them from a side view, they look almost like a bean, like a bubble, and this goes for the new Kia EVs and Teslas, of course, and now we have Mercedes here as well. I think they're onto something here, Mercedes, but at the same time I wish they had a little bit more different designs between the EQS and the EQE, so we can distinguish them from each other. A shorter wheelbase suits this bubbly design approach to the EV market that we have right now. A shorter wheelbase suits it better than we have right here on the long EQS, where the wheels sit so far out from the greenhouse that it kind of looks a little weird. Where we have here, this is actually a sporty design, and I like that it dips a little bit, and we have some sort of hood here, and also have this upswing at the very end of this design, creating almost a trunk looking feeling for the EQE. Those are the differences between the two, and I think you can't really tell the difference if you see these cars very quickly, but the wheelbase is what makes all the difference when it comes to the appeal of these two designs.